Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are in the world. My name is James Bean, the Managing Director of the Standard Club UK, and a very warm welcome to the Standard Club's webinar on Seafarer Wellbeing, which is being hosted jointly today with ISWAN. It's my honour to introduce our two guest speakers. So we've got Captain Eve Vanderborn, Director of Loss Prevention at the Standard Club, and Caitlin Vaughan, Project Manager at ISWAN, which is the International Seafarers Welfare and Association Network. Just a very brief overview of our two guest speakers today. So Eve joined the club in 2010 and has been the Director of Loss Prevention for the last 7 years. He's overall responsible for the full range of club loss prevention activities, which has included in the last couple of years a particular focus on crew welfare and health and well-being. Caitlin joined ISWAN as Project Manager in 2014 and is responsible for running a variety of projects and events which aim to make a positive impact on the lives of seafarers. So Eve will shortly introduce the topics for today's discussions. The discussion is expected to take between 15 to 20 minutes, and there'll be the opportunity to ask questions at the end. Please do use the chat box to send through any questions you have, and I'll be putting these to Eve and Caitlin when the discussion has finished. So Eve, over to you to introduce today's topics.
Thank you, James. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the second Standard Club Loss Prevention webinar. We had our first webinar about a month ago, and during that time, we talked about the various consequences that the COVID-19 pandemic has caused on the maritime industry. That time as well, we gave some practical advice as well on how you can deal with these issues. For example, we talked about how the visitors on board can be dealt with, how to do your bunkering operations, how to deal with surveyors on board or anti-piracy measures. We talked a little bit about PME certificates and about charter parties. In case you missed that webinar, please do go to our website or on the club's YouTube page where you can view that webinar. For today, we wanted to have a further discussion and focus a little bit more on the seafarer. How is the seafarer dealing with the pandemic that we are going through? And what is the advice that we can give to the seafarer or to the HR managers or ship managers that are listening in? That's why we are really happy that Caitlin can join us today to give the perspective that ISWAN has with their big experience on this topic. I also want to mention that this week is UK Mental Health Awareness Week, which I think is quite important. And I'm sure later Caitlin will also give us some examples of what ISWAN is doing during this Mental Health Awareness Week. Now, I think most people will be aware of how COVID-19 has affected the seafarers, has affected crew worldwide. There's been a lot of publicity on how crew is being stuck on board of ships. We are seeing a lot of articles on how their contracts are being extended way beyond what usually they are asked to be on board. So even with all of this publicity that is being put on it, I do wonder sometimes about a non-shipping person. When they go to the supermarket, when they go and get their groceries, do they realize the importance of seafarers, how important it is for their daily groceries to be able to go and get them from the supermarket? So I think it is really important that we are able to talk about this topic, how seafarers are stuck on board, how that is affecting their mental well-being, and what are some of the solutions that we can give them. Now, I also want to stress it is not just the seafarers on board. There are also a lot of seafarers that are ashore. They are at home with their families, which is probably good because those that are on board will be worrying about their family. But those that are at home, they have no financial income. They'll be waiting much longer than what they usually wait to go back on board, to start a new contract and to earn a salary again. They will have been planning their budget for the normal duration of their leave period, and they will probably be out of cash by now. So for them also, there is a lot of stress. There's a lot of negative effects on their mental well-being, and I'm sure later we will talk about those as well. Now, We know that ISWAN has a free 24/7 helpline available for seafarers that they can call in case they want to talk with somebody. And I think it would be good if, Caitlin, if you could give us a little bit of an idea on what are the various kind of topics that you get on your helpline. What is it that seafarers complain about?
Sure. Thanks, Eve. Yeah, our 24-hour helpline, Seafarer Help. We hear from seafarers all the time, pandemic or no pandemic, about various issues, and we've seen quite a change in the last few months. In some ways, in the kind of the number of cases that we're getting. So we're seeing triple the number of cases over the last couple of months, all related to pandemic issues. But the sort of types of cases we're seeing have changed slightly in that we're seeing a much larger number of seafarers contacting us about repatriation issues, as you'd probably expect. And that kind of, that's issues with seafarers being stranded due to various impacts of COVID, but also seafarers who are unable to join their vessel and may have become stranded that way as well, but are also just stuck, like you touched on, obviously. What's not that different in terms of the commonality of cases is financial issues. So that's usually one of the top reasons that seafarers will contact us, because of unpaid wages and financial issues. But where it differs here is that we're seeing a much larger number of seafarers contacting us needing financial assistance. And again, that's probably to be expected when we're looking at seafarers who were expecting to join a vessel and haven't been able to, so they haven't been paid. I think what's really significant here, though, is that for the first time, what's entered our top 5 issues is seafarers contacting us directly, specifically because of a mental health issue, or because they want to talk through an issue, feel stressed and worried, as a direct, with the pandemic being a direct cause of that, really. And while we are there for seafarers, and we think it's very important that we're able to offer an emotional support service to seafarers, it's not usually in the top 5 issues that we see. I think also worth mentioning as well that we're seeing a lot of concerns from seafarers related to lack of PPE, and just concerns that they don't have enough knowledge about the right procedures to follow on board and keep safe on board. So probably nothing very surprising, but it has really changed the sorts of cases that we're dealing with on a daily basis.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. When we talk about communication on board of ships, one of the complaints that I think we are hearing quite often as well is that seafarers do not really know what is happening. That can be, for example, that they don't receive proper information about the pandemic worldwide, but also I think because with the sheer amount of communication that these days is available, I do wonder that they are on all kinds of social media, be it from Facebook or WhatsApp or anything. And I wonder how correct all the information is that they are receiving on those social media. And I do think there is something that ship owners or managers can make sure that they are being really open with the seafarers. Let them know really what is happening in the world with COVID. How is it affecting their signing off? What are the owners doing about it? And try and give them a little bit of comfort that way. I sometimes wonder the opposite side. Not all the ships are having Wi-Fi on board. Not all the ships are having good communication. And I wonder in those cases if there is something that an owner can do to provide additional means of communication to the seafarer so that they are able to call their family, make sure that everybody at home is doing well, and again, get a bit of comfort that way. Is that something, Caitlin, from your side, you have any thoughts on communication?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've just really hit on all of the issues there. We are seeing from some of our cases a bit of distrust that the company are doing everything they can. And I think in some, it's difficult to know. I'm sure there are some times when companies could be doing a lot more. But I think there are other cases as well where it's more of a lack of communication. I think it's really important that, even when there is no update, even if the company's doing all they can and are restricted by the various different problems, the challenges that there are, I think it's just very important to be keeping all the seafarers on board at home and their families updated as much as possible, just as a way of making sure that people's imaginations don't run away with them. It's so understandable that, in that issue, and there's all of that uncertainty, that the feeling of being just abandoned really by everyone that can help them here is a real issue. But I think really importantly as well, as you mentioned, is the issue of communication on board. So I think if companies can improve communication, then that makes a massive difference. If you can contact home, and there are so many seafarers who are worried about, or have contacted us because they're worried about their family back home, and whatever the particular situation is with the pandemic in their home countries. So that would help to alleviate some of those worries as well, being able to contact home frequently. But yeah, there is also the concern of misinformation as well. So that's another reason it's just really important that companies are keeping in contact with their seafarers as much as possible. Try and stave away any of that false information that circulates very easily.
I had one seafarer complain, saying that this was the case of a seafarer ashore, and he kept trying to call his HR manager to get information, and he just never got any reply back. Is there something for those people ashore that are waiting for a new contract, that are having financial issues? Is there anything from your side? You have any thoughts on that?
Well, we're assisting a large number of seafarers who are in those sorts of situations at the moment. Our relief funds, we've got a couple of relief funds, one that's specifically for Filipino seafarers that we piloted very recently. It's a partnership with the company Ship Money, and another emergency fund, Seafarers Emergency Fund, and those funds have been overwhelmed. I mean, the hardship fund that we have in the Philippines, in a matter of weeks, we received over 1,500 applications. So that's a sort of indication of the need that's there. And a lot of those applications are coming from seafarers who are expecting to get paid, and we're relying on payments to pay, their usual bills as anyone would, but special cases with families that rely on their seafarer relatives to pay for important medication, those sorts of things. We've seen cases as well in our relief fund of seafarers whose families have been affected by recent volcano, and then on top of this there's the pandemic. So there's been so many different issues affecting them, and it's left them in such a difficult position. And I think the not being able to predict something like this makes it even harder in lots of ways.
Yeah, I do think so. It's really not just the seafarers on board that are having a hard time. It's those ashore as well. If I move back to those seafarers that are stuck on board, sometimes I do wonder. You have clean air, you have a good job, you actually have a job, you have an income. Why worry? But then, okay, of course, there is a high risk, and of course, they will be concerned that they are possibly contracting the virus if they go into so many different ports. So yes, of course, there is stress for those people that are on board of ships. But what can we recommend to the Seafarer? Is there a way, if you read the articles online, there's different opinions on whether or not seafarers on board should be socializing with each other. I see some articles that are saying that they, even on board of a ship, people should keep separate social distancing. I'm personally quite concerned about that. I do think it is quite important for seafarers on board to be able to socialize with each other. And I think it is important for them that that they are able to prevent the virus from coming on board rather than keep a distance from each other. And is that something from your side? What are your thoughts on that, Caitlin?
Yeah, it's a real worry. I think we really try and emphasize the importance of creating strong relationships on board and connecting with others. As a group that are particularly vulnerable to social isolation or loneliness and missing home, all of those things can make it more difficult, I think, to connect with crew. But it's even more important, when your workplace is also your home. But yes, if you're not even allowed to be physically near each other, then that's going to make things even harder, and it's already challenging. Every case differs so much, but in lots of ways, what we see is they're actually one of the safest groups, away from the pandemic. So obviously every case differs, and it's just, again, really important that companies are able to communicate these clear guidelines to seafarers on it, and where possible, if we could try and avoid social distancing on board ships, if it's safe to do so, then it's the best thing, really.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Now, if we look at different ways of help that is available to seafarers, last year the club produced, we did a big campaign on seafarer well-being, where we stressed the importance of the physical well-being, doing your exercising, eating healthy. But that time as well, we stressed the social aspect of being on board, because you're having so many different cultures on board of a ship. You're having different ways of doing things, and people may not always be that interested. A lot of ships are alcohol-free these days. There's another incentive that is gone to socialize with each other. So I think those people that are interested, definitely go and have a look on the club's website, have a look at our poster campaign on well-being. But then similarly, Caitlin, from ISWAN's side, you also have a lot of initiatives that you have available to seafarers at the moment.
Yeah, well, we're actually working on a project called Social Interaction Matters, and it's looking at we're conducting research at the moment to look at every different part of it, because it's actually a really massive topic, and looking at how you can best facilitate social life on board. There are so many different things to consider, really, and this started obviously before the pandemic broke, but I think in the short term we have a number of resources that look at the importance of connecting with others and have some tips there, particularly in psychological well-being at sea. One of our guides that's quite easy to find. I think at the moment, because of so many restrictions and so many challenges anyway, it's really important to talk to seafarers and see what they think they need to be able to facilitate a better social life on board, as well as just clearly emphasising the importance of it. That uncertainty for so many of not knowing when they're going to be able to go home will be such a focus and such a distraction. I think there are a lot of companies that are really looking at what they can do to try and improve the social life of their seafarers on board, and the various different ideas for initiatives. So I think, the first starting point is talking to crew, seeing how they're getting on, and another important part of that is ensuring that they're doing what they can to avoid conflicts, which I think are probably much more likely at the moment, that everyone's tension is so high.
Yeah, thanks, Caitlin. James, do we have any questions already that have come in?
We do, Eve. Yeah, thank you, and thank you both. That was a very, very fascinating discussion, and I think Eve made the point at the outset that I think a lot of us are sitting here taking for granted how things magically appear on the shelf without consideration for all the crew who are bringing those goods, sailing those goods around the world, and and the impact that COVID-19 is having on those crew and their health and well-being. And it's really reassuring to know that ISWAN is there to support and to help. And with that, Caitlin, a couple of questions for you, if I could, from the audience. So, can any seafarer seek assistance from ISWAN, irrespective of their employees?
Irrespective of their employees?
Yeah, is it open to all?
Yeah, we're there for all seafarers, whichever sector, and their families as well.
Oh,
so we'll do whatever we can to help.
And then linked to that, so the majority of inquiries that you're receiving today, are they coming from mariners ashore or on board?
Good question. We're seeing a really massive split, and it kind of depends what you mean. It might be someone might be off the vessel, because we're seeing so many questions about repatriations and getting home. A great deal of those seafarers, at least in the beginning as well, were stranded. So possibly more ashore, but I'm not entirely sure. I can find out though, if anyone needs that information afterwards.
Thank you. And then we've got a question that's come in from Deepak Shetty in ISWAN Mumbai. Do employment contracts and/or P&I covers in existence provide cover for crew in situations such as the current pandemic? If not, how would seafarers be covered whilst on duty? Eve, would you like me to answer that one?
Happy for you to go through that, James.
Absolutely. So, putting my Standard Club hat on here. So, the Standard Club obviously covers crew liabilities under crew contracts, which of course includes illness. Includes repatriation in the event of illness. So, essentially, so far as a crew member is concerned, whilst they're on board a ship, the ship should be entered with a P&I club or P&I cover, which would cover liabilities to the crew member in respect of illness, for repatriation ashore and subsequent treatment. So I think seafarers worldwide should be feeling suitably reassured that there is insurance in place which would respond to their needs, to the owner's needs to essentially assist the crew member should there be issues. And of course, from the ship owner's perspective, there's also support available from their P&I clubs insofar as the ship may subsequently be quarantined, and we provide cover and support insofar as quarantine vessels, but also generally we also provide a wide range of help and advice through the Standard Club's website. And we've got an FAQ on our website which outlines the basis of the cover that we provide, and I think that FAQ is as relevant to crew members as it is to ship owners, and it really explains the breadth of the cover that owners have available to them and how that supports and helps crew and the ship owners in the current difficult times. So we've got another question, or an observation actually, from Captain Shori from India. He works with thousands of cadets and students in maritime colleges. Their average age is 20. They're soon to be seafarers and have some serious doubts about their futures and little knowledge of the future shipping scenario. Considering they're the future, and although we as a company do our bit, we think they too need larger inclusion and attention. So I think everything that we've been discussing has been about addressing sort of health and well-being on board. But Caitlin, what's your view in terms of advice for crew of the future? What would you be reassuring them around in terms of the current situation?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult really, isn't it? Because it's so uncertain, so I can really sympathize with how they're feeling. It's really understandable. I think there's hope, and the biggest thing to remember is how essential the shipping industry is. That's not going away anytime soon. So, if we could be hopeful that things will turn a corner fairly soon, then, although I think there will be a major impact, there'll still be such a need for those employees, and I hopefully that can offer some reassurance. I'd just add as well, I think when we're considering cadets and those going to sea for the first time, it's just really important that they have the prepared, that they have the training and they're prepared for life at sea as much as possible, because that can be a major shock, and that they often make it a lot of the cases that we see on the helpline during normal time is cadets that weren't quite ready to go to sea and weren't really expecting some of the challenges that they face. So it's something else to consider.
Yeah, forearmed is forewarned, I suppose, and being prepared for life for sure, but also importantly knowing that there's people like yourselves out there who can provide that support, when times do get tough, that there's someone they can speak to, in addition to, I'm sure, all the support and help they receive from the company that's employing them. But at least if they're aware of the potential challenges and their eyes are open to it, then it certainly makes it easier, I imagine, going into that situation. But Eve, any thoughts from your side?
I fully agree with what Caitlin and you were saying on this. Cadets are the future. Shipping is not going to go away. I think it is really important for the wider industry to work closely with cadets, make sure that they feel comfortable as well. And I know Captain Chori is organizing a big event on an annual basis in India, which I think is really good. And other countries can take example of that and work with their own cadets. But similarly, I think ship owners, ship managers can work with their staff ashore as well, make them feel part of the company, give them additional training while they are waiting for, okay, I know seafarers is not going to be happy to go back to school, etc., but at least they are doing refresher courses or being trained on something else, and that passes the time for them, and before they know it, they'll hopefully be back on board of a ship.
Eva, can I ask, I mean, you spend a considerable amount of time at sea, but was mental health and well-being talked about when you were at sea?
It's a really good question. Somebody told me that, let me say it like this. There's a saying about back in my days, ships were of wood and men were of steel, and now it's the other way around. And maybe that is the case, but I think mental health problems have always been there. I do not think that life at sea is necessarily much harder. I think it is very much different now compared to how it was when I was at sea or when other people were at sea. And I think that now is just the time that a lot more focus is being put about mental health, which I think is a really good thing. And I think there should not be any taboo around it, which again is the difficult part for a seafarer, for them to go up, stand up and say, oh, Captain, I'm feeling a little bit depressed here, because of course then how are you going to think about letting that seafarer steer your multi-million-dollar ship in the middle of the night through Singapore Straits? So I can understand that there is an issue talking about it, but that shouldn't hold us back, and I think it is really important that we do talk about mental health.
I think we've got a couple more minutes, so we've got one more question, which I'd like to put to you both. And this is asked by Edwin Rangel in Panama. Hello, guys. Just wanted to ask about the intention to name the seafarers as key workers. How can it be pushed? How can it be pushed the governments to declare us as essential personnel? So in that way, crew changes can be in some way made a little easier. And I think it's a really good point, and clearly it's going to differ from country to country. But do either of you have thoughts on that?
I think there is. Sorry, Caitlin. The IMO is doing a lot of work on this, and again, maybe that's something that is not always as visible definitely not to the seafarer. So that's one of the parts that we discussed earlier, the communication. Do let the seafarer know what is actually being done at IMO level. But then also the IMO doesn't have the power to go and declare seafarers as key workers. That remains up to the individual flag states that have to implement what the IMO is pushing forward. A lot has been done there, and I think some countries are taking it up a little bit better than others. I know that now slowly, at least, crew changes are getting possible. Slowly, the countries are opening up. We've seen that in Amsterdam, for example, there is a crew hub where a lot of companies are going to organize their crew change. There's another large company which is simply sailing their crew back home instead of flying them home. So there's a lot of companies are finding means and ways. But that is also keep fighting with your not fighting literally, keep discussing with your local government, draw the attention to the guidelines from the IMO, from the ICS, from the ITF, and push them to assist you with the crew change.
Thank you. And on that, Eve, we've actually also in relation to sort of crew changes, one of our colleagues, Phil Stevenson in the Greek office, has quite rightly pointed out that BIMCO is currently working on a clause for charter parties which would give ship owners more liberty and time in port to deviate to, or more liberty to deviate to allow seafarers to leave ships. So presumably it also gives them more time in port, and that draft is currently in progress. So I think that'll be helpful from an owner's perspective, certainly in dealing with some of the operational challenges associated with deviation. I think we've got a little bit more time, hopefully, and with that, there's a good question here which we've not touched on yet, but I think it would be interesting to hear whether it's come up on the helpline. This is from Sarish Nandi saying, we hear a lot about telemedicine initiatives, however, we do not see much action or implementation around the same. Is it because of lack of connectivity and hesitance from ship owners and ship managers to invest in SATCOM packages? Kellen, are you seeing many queries regarding availability of medicines? Do you get a feel that people aren't able to access what they need?
It has come up, not to a great extent, but there are definitely worries there that seafarers are going to run out of medications and they don't know what to do, and some of that will be tied up in worries about confidentiality as well, depending on what the illness is. But in terms of kind of provision of helplines, that I think there has, I mean, anecdotally anyways, an observation, I think there are more shipping companies that are taking up these types of services, but the point around connectivity on board and maybe that acting as a barrier to provision of these sorts of helplines, is a really good point and probably should be something to be considered.
Yeah, certainly in discussions I've had with owners more recently, they've been actually talking about increasing the availability of connectivity on board, and they've seen the fact that crew are on board much longer periods of time, and with that, they need to be able to connect with family and friends, and they've been investing more in increasing that connectivity. But of course, each owner is going to differ in their view and approaches on that. But I have seen positive signs, and hopefully others will be seeing the same, where owners are saying, clearly we need to give our crew more opportunity to connect with family and friends. We just got an observation here, just put in by Rachel Glynn Williams, which is a good comment, I think, which is we shouldn't equate mental health with mental illness. We can talk about physical health without talking about heart attacks and diabetes. We should be able to talk about mental health without talking about illnesses and conditions. So mental health is everyone's everyday business, and I think actually, Rachel, that's a very good comment. And anything from either of the two of you on that? Yeah,
and I think I'd just like to say that it's an approach that we like to take as well, and really is a focus of our good mental health resources, particularly in psychological wellbeing at sea that I mentioned earlier in that guide. We look at the best ways to reach your full potential, to be flourishing. We talk a lot about how 1 in 5, 1 in 4 of us may experience a mental health issue one day, but it's really true, the same number really. We're looking at about 25% of people who actually flourishing. So what we try to do in psychological wellbeing at sea is look at the key components of what it means to flourish, and look at ways that we can work towards that, I suppose, at a time when we're already feeling good.
And then we've got a couple of questions that come in actually pretty much at the same time, asking pretty much the same thing, which clearly goes to show this is very topical, but it's focused on cruise ships. And in particular, we're hearing increasing reporting of incidents of suicide for those stuck on board. And I guess a general concern about the lack of intervention on government's part to intervene to assist those crew on board cruise ships. Caitlin, is ISWAN receiving predominantly more calls from people on cruise ships, or what's your experience in that?
Yeah, I mean, there is an increase in cases from cruise ships, and we are also quite concerned about the reports of a number of suicides. It's really worrying, so we're looking at this and looking at ways that we can be most helpful in terms of our expertise, and working with the consultant clinical psychologist who designed all of our resources. We're working closely with her to see what ways we can be helpful here, and part of the most obvious way is signposting the helpline, really, and making sure that those sorts of resources and information is available to crew, and they know there is somewhere to turn.
Can I ask with that, Kate, what influence ISWAN has at the government level, if at all? I mean, which organisations are you working with, and what's your sphere of influence?
I know that our executive director is working with a number of different people within the industry and raising this as an issue within his meetings. And we'll do all we can. We've met with a couple of members to look at the best ways forward, so we're working towards that, hopefully.
Good. And so we're putting you on the spot here a little, but a final question for you, and I think with this we'll draw this discussion to a close, as I'm conscious people have got to get on. But post-pandemic seems a bit unrealistic at the moment. What improvements can be done in helping seafarers to be more resilient and mentally strong?
For me, I think there are so many different ways of answering that, and there are so many different parts of this. So we're, like you mentioned, that looking at a government level, I think looking on a government level and organisational level and the individual level, that they're all equally important, really. So I mean, just a few ways. We obviously mentioned our helpline and having support and confidential support in place for seafarers who need it. I think training is really important at every level. I mentioned preparedness for cadets, but also making sure that senior staff as well are fully trained in mental health awareness, that we're doing what we can to reduce stigma. And I think it's really important, and we see this, this is probably a really important step as well when we're looking at the concerns on board cruise ships in particular at the moment. If we really look at ways that not just increasing understanding and awareness of mental health, but if we can help seafarers understand when a colleague may be struggling, but importantly prepare them and know how they can respond to those concerns. At an organisational level, I think it's really important that shipping companies are focusing on creating policies, developing policies and procedures on mental health, and just making sure that they're doing everything they can there at a company level. We can always offer kind of more detailed guidance on that where people need it. That's my rushed answer.
Okay, put you on the spot there, but Eve, and thank you, Kate. Eve, in terms of the recommendations, when you're going into ship owners' offices, you're talking about crew health and well-being. Are you having discussions around these specific points, and what sort of help is the club able to provide?
I think it really is. I echo what Caitlin is saying. I think that is very much true. I want to go back to what we said earlier about communication. I really think it is important that there is an open communication about all of these topics, not just to keep the seafarer informed about what is happening. And it doesn't need to be a pandemic. It can be any normal ship operation. They need to be able to know what is happening. Similarly, they need to be able to know that they can talk to their ship managers, or that they can talk to organizations like ISWAN if there is an issue, that they don't need to be afraid of talking to about these topics. I think it's important, if you want to build up resilience, is you need to improve your socializing on board. We keep coming back to that. It's one of the big differences that I see when I go on board of ships nowadays compared to when I was at sea. Okay, I know I shouldn't compare to it back when I was at sea, but still, that is a main difference. And I think with the bigger diversity of cultures that we have on board of ships, it has become a lot more difficult to socialize. And I think that is something that needs to be focused on, which is what we try to do with our well-being campaign that we launched last year. So those were a few of my thoughts, James.
Well, Eve, Caitlin, thank you very much indeed for an excellent discussion, very topical and really helpful to hear both of your views. A very big thank you to our audience as well. Some really good questions coming through on the chat box there. I think there's a few more questions still to answer, but conscious of time. So I think with that, if it's okay to you both, where there's direct questions, perhaps you'd be happy to reply by email subsequently. And I know you both kindly said before we started this session that if people did have any questions directly, they could contact either of you, which is appreciated. So thank you very much to you both. Thank you very much to the audience. And yeah, until the next one.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.